Welcome to the Holly Furtick Book Club. It is March and I am so excited that we have such an incredible book and such an incredible author tonight, and it's Women's History Month. So what better book to be discussing than The Women by Kristen Hannah. Guys, I'm so excited. I absolutely love this book. I hope you did too. And I can't believe that the Holly Furtick Book Club has finally gotten Kristen Hannah to come and join us and talk with us. I'm so excited. I can't wait. Let me welcome a couple of you and see where you are joining us from. Hello, Heidi Gorecki. She says, it was so good. Shell says, hi, Holly, so excited for book club. Lisa Hughes says, this is amazing. Jennifer James Hall, your favorite author. You finally got her. I know. I'm so excited. Let's see what else. Kristen Bosch says, such a huge deal. Love Brinkley says, loved it. Amy Lynn Corbett is on. She says, so good. You guys, Amy was just texting me. I think she started this book like 2 days ago, and she said to me, this was literally like 10 minutes ago. She said, I'm listening at 1.5 speed. I'm almost done. So Amy, let us know if you finished. I want to know if you finished. Hello, Donna Marie Mara. She says, so exciting. Ashley Tucker's here. Trenton's here. He says, hello. Let's see who else. Donna is here. They're going so fast. Dobie from Connecticut. Jackie James from the UK. Hello. Kelly wants to know if I have an eagle on my sweatshirt. On my t-shirt. Yes, I do. What else do we have? Stephen Hallman says, hey, Holly, tell Stephen I love his book from Dallas, NC. I will pass the word along. Spotted Puppy says she was reading at 2 times speed, trying to finish. Renee Cup is on, and she says, goals is to have Holly text about books. Well, Renee, I think I reposted your Instagram today, so I'm glad to have you on. Who else is here? Let's see. If you're just joining us, it is Women's History Month. It is the Holly Furtick Book Club night. And we are talking about this amazing book. It's called The Women. It's by Kristen Hannah. And Kristen's going to be joining us in just a moment. And I am so excited. Raquel says this is her first time with us. Welcome, Raquel. We all welcome you. Kristen Flanders says hi from San Diego. Charisse is in the chat. And let's see. I don't know. What else do we have going on except to talk about this amazing book? And I want us to talk about it before we get Kristen on, and I want us to do it quick because we got to get her on and we got to have our time with her, right? Okay. So also, my Wi-Fi is a little iffy, so make sure if it starts to like pause or something, just let me know. Okay. So let's jump right in. Okay. I don't even know where to start, but we'll start like we normally do. Things I loved about this book. Okay, so first of all, as you guys know, I'm a huge Kristen Hannah fan. I have read, not all, because she's written a lot of books, but I've read many, many of her books. I would say The Nightingale is probably in my top 5 books that I've ever read. And, but I have really, really loved a lot of Kristen Hannah books. I'm one of those people, like, she puts out a book, I'm going to read it. And I've really enjoyed so many of them. So, but this one really got me because when I was 15, I started watching ER from the very first season with George Clooney. And so I love ER. I don't know, I think maybe at heart, I think I would have gone to Vietnam and been a nurse. I probably would have been a very terrible one. I probably wouldn't have survived the heat and the mosquitoes and all of the actual connection. Okay, I'm back. Let me know if the connection is okay, guys. Oh, everybody say hi to Deb Boitnott. My mom is on. Okay, so I was talking about ER. So I'm actually like sold from the very beginning on this setting, this historical fiction, wartime, emergency room, nurse. And I'm just totally loved the whole setting. But then I don't know if you guys would agree with this. I was pleasantly surprised. So when I picked up the book, I really didn't know much about it. I had heard Kristen Hannah say that these were some of her favorite characters that she'd ever written, and that she'd wanted to write about Vietnam for a really long time. So I knew a little bit, but I didn't really know like where the book was going to take me. And I think I just assumed the whole book was going to be in Vietnam. But okay, you guys are saying my connection went out for a minute, but it's good now. Okay, keep me posted. So I was pleasantly surprised by the second half of the book, because I didn't know that she was going to come home from the war so early. And I was so bought into this story of watching her come home and obviously not receive a hero's welcome, even by her own parents, and then watch this journey that she went through for years and years and years, and all of the drama unfold. If you're just joining us, we read The Women by Kristen Hannah, and we're talking about this book tonight, and Kristen's going to join us, and we're so excited. Joe Erica Lopez says, I agree. I had no idea where the book was going to go. So I agree. I was pleasantly surprised, and I was totally on board for Frankie's entire journey. It's almost like a coming of age book, but for a woman, which I love. Also, you guys know that female characters, strong female leads, female friendships are like my top favorite thing to read about. So I was so on board for the friendships and the way she had these relationships with these women, and they would fly across the country. They would call. I mean, this wasn't a time where you could text, but they would call, and they would keep calling until she answered, and they would fly across the country when she didn't answer. And I just love the idea of women in our lives like that. I love the progression of Frankie's parents. I really want to talk to you guys about Frankie's parents. So get ready for that. And then I loved all the twists and turns. Steph Van Alman just said there were so many moments of no way. And I totally agree. There were like several things that I did not see coming. So I just want to say, first of all, if you are just joining us and you've never been a part of the Holly Furtick book club before, and you're interested in this book but you haven't read it, I'm going to tell you that this is not going to be an interview where we talk about the book without talking about the book. We're going to talk about the book, and there's going to be some spoilers. So if you haven't finished the book, I'm going to spoil some of the major twists and turns, because this book really took me on a ride, and there were a lot of things that I didn't see coming. I love the progression of her parents. And then the last thing I was going to say is I really don't like books that glorify extramarital affairs. And so I was a little bit nervous at that part in the book, but I really loved how even that part of the book, it was presented in a way that you were like, no, don't do this. And you knew there was something not right. Anyway, all of those things, those are some of my favorite things about the book. I want to know what are some of your favorite things about the book. Bethany Ear says, such a ride. And Slingshot Bates says, Rye was such a dirtbag. That's a great name for him. And let's see, what else are you saying? Porcelain says she was very torn about it. Yeah, about the affair. Lindsay Franklin says that she was sad when the book was over. I totally agree. This was one of those books that grabbed you from the beginning. And then when it was all over, you were sad and you missed the characters. It's just everything that you want in a great book. So, okay, let's get started. Somebody tell me, let's just jump right into Frankie's romantic relationships. Okay. So we had the Dr. Jamie, and you were so on board with her holding to her values and being he's married. I don't care how much I care for him. I'm not going to do that to his wife. And so you kind of like Dr. Jamie, but you're man, okay, where's this going? Then Rye comes in, and then Henry comes in later. So my question for you is, which one of these men did you really were you rooting for? Did you know that Rye was not good from the beginning? Who were you rooting for? How did you feel about the way she treated Henry? Kristen says the ending was truly the best part. It made it all worth it. Tor says Rye was trouble from the start. Beth from My Dog Drives Me Crazy, she says, I was disappointed Rye came home, but guess the book wouldn't have worked. Okay, so we could talk about that for a second while you guys are telling me who you loved. I did not see that coming. I was just like into this book and I did not see Rye being alive. I don't know why. I feel kind of disappointed in myself that I didn't see that. Let me see what some of you guys are saying. Okay, Beth loved Jamie. Kania loved Jamie. Sai loved Henry. Joy says Dr. Jamie at the end. Let's see, what else? Shell says she was hoping that he would end up with Henry. But like, okay, let's be honest. We knew she wasn't going to end up with Henry. He was too nice. He was too good. And for whatever reason, like she just couldn't with Henry. All right, let's see. Somebody just said something. Nicole says, I fell for Rye twice too. But Elaine says she was suspicious of Rye early on. And then, okay, this is interesting. Katie says, honestly, I was so sad about all of the men. I just wanted her to catch a break. So something interesting that we can ask Kristen, and I heard her say that this book is really about Frankie's relationships with Barb and Ethel. And when I heard her say that, I was like, oh yeah, it is. Because the men, they're there, obviously, but the people who were there for her all along was Barb and Frankie. My friend Christine Kane is on, and she's kind of fighting a little bit for Rye. She says Rye was human. Okay, I guess I can get on with that. Okay, Darnell says, I knew Jamie didn't die. All right, there's a good question for you. Give me a thumbs up if you knew all along that Jamie didn't die. And here's what I'm going to tell you that I thought about Jamie. I thought when she gave Jamie, you guys, your comments are flying through so fast. When she gave Jamie the rock that she had like picked up from like going out and helping people, and she like wrote on it, I can't remember, she like wrote a message on it. I knew, I was like, I don't think that he's dead. But then I forgot about him. And I like at the very end, I was like, I wonder if that Dr. Jamie is going to come back. Okay, you guys are giving me the thumbs up that you knew Jamie was not dead. I mean, you just knew it, right? When she gave him the rock. Okay, but with Rye, give me a thumbs up if you thought that Rye was going to come back from the prisoner of war. For some reason, I thought that maybe her brother was going to come back. But I really bought into Rye's death. I don't know. I think I was just like so into it that maybe I just didn't, I don't know. I was so shocked when she was pregnant and she's engaged to Henry and she sees Rye as a prisoner of war. And you're just like, oh my gosh, of course, because she wasn't his next of kin. She didn't know his family. Emily says she knew it. Donna says she knew it. I know a lot of you knew it. And I was honestly kind of disappointed in myself that I was so shocked by that. But then that's also what makes a great book, right? Simper Wife says, I bought into Rye's death as well. Dina wants to know, did I audio read it? I definitely audio read it. Amy says that she kept thinking that the brother would come back. Okay, I guess I'm not alone in that. Because then afterwards I was like, why did I think her brother was going to come back? Duh. But anyway, okay, here's my next question for you. We all loved Frankie's friendships in this book. What did you feel about Barb and Ethel and their commitment to their relationship and how we got to track with it the whole way? Tell me about like your feelings for Barb and Ethel, because like I said, when I saw Kristen said that the book was really about Frankie's relationship with Barb and Ethel, it just like it all made sense of how you were like, oh, okay, this really was about how the power of friendships and how we're all meant to have women in our lives who come alongside us and who cheer us on and who call us when they know we're struggling and who show up for us when we're at some of our lowest moments. And I just truly felt like what a gift. I think there was one scene where Barb like hopped on a plane and showed up at Frankie's door because she wasn't answering the phone or something. And I had this moment where I was like, yeah, this is what Frankie deserves in her life. And we all deserve women like that who show up for us. Leanne says they were forever friends, and I loved how they stood with her no matter what. Gail says unconditional love. Lindsay says they were the best kind of friends. Christine says they supported each other and still had their own identity. That's true. Like they were all in like different parts of the country. And I think like, obviously there's all different types of female friendships, right? We have sisters. We have friends that are like in town. We have friends that we work with, and they all piece together. I always like to think about friendships as like, you know, sometimes I think when you read a lot of books, you think that there's something wrong with you because you don't have this like one bestie, this one like Firefly Lane. Did anybody read Kristen Hannah's book Firefly Lane? And sometimes when you read a book like that, you think like, oh, is there something wrong with me that I don't have this like lifelong bestie? But I loved how Barb and Ethel came along in Frankie's life when she was in her 20s. They weren't like her best friend from age 5. And they didn't live in the same town, and they didn't necessarily like, they came together when they needed to. And I think a lot of times that we get friendships that support us, that come from all different parts of our lives. And I know I have friends that don't live where I live, and I have friends that do live in the town that I live in. And I think it's so important to really develop those relationships with people and be there for those people that are there in my life. Anyway, just made me think of all of those things and how special it is to have women like that in our own lives. And I know that we were all thinking of our own Barbs and Ethels. And yeah, anyway, okay, it's time. It's time to bring Kristen on. I can't wait to talk with her. As always, if you have any questions for Kristen, throw them up in the chat. Make sure you give us all the hearts when you're liking what we're talking about, because it always makes me feel good. And if I can answer your questions or throw them at Kristen, I will certainly try. Okay, here we go. Let's see. I was really nervous about the my Wi-Fi situation tonight. So let's see. Fangirl says Barb and Ethel are just like my two best friends. That's awesome. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, gosh, this is so great. What a fabulous book club. I have never had a book club where we actively got to talk about spoilers and all of the various versions and questions that readers have. So this will be very exciting.
Oh, I'm so glad, and I'm so honored that you would come on tonight and take the time to come and chat with us. We loved this book so much, and so many of the people here are like such big fans of yours. And so first of all, thank you for coming on, and thank you for like pushing through and writing stories about women that just come alive, and but also teach us and challenge us. I'm just so excited to chat with you tonight.
Well, thank you. That's definitely what I'm always really trying to do. I mean, it's so obvious. You mentioned Firefly Lane, you can mention almost any book, and really female friendship, sisterhood, motherhood, you know, these female relationships are so important to me. And the older I get, I think the more I realize not just that they're formative for us, but that they define us and enrich us and hold us up.
Yeah. And I think it's really special that that's what you love to write about, because so many books are romance or, you know, fantasy, and you sometimes find those friendships, but they're so important. And I think a lot of times, because there's such an emphasis on romance, that we forget how important it is to have those females in our lives. Did you intend, I mean, you started writing in the 90s. You've written over 20 books. Did you start out going like, okay, I want to write about women. I want to write about female relationships. Where did you realize like, this is the lane that I want to be in?
Well, I started writing so that I could be an at-home mom. So, I wrote my first book when I was pregnant with my son.
Okay.
And from then on, I was just constantly writing. So my books have evolved, over the course of all of these years, where early on I was very interested in being a young wife, in being a young mother, in raising children, in trying to get the work-life balance, all the things that my girlfriends and I were talking about. And it wasn't until well, I guess 40, when I hit 40, Firefly Lane, that was when I started sort of using fiction to look at my own life. That was the
Okay.
book I wrote about my mother's breast cancer.
Okay.
Um, and and actually, interestingly enough, I started that book at the age she was when she was diagnosed, and I finished it at the age she was when she
Wow.
died. And since the whole book had been my journey to find her and understand her, it felt like, she was guiding me through all of that. And then 10 years later, when my son was, off and gone, and I was an empty nester with my husband, that's when I sort of looked around and started thinking about all of the amazing stories about women that we had not been told,
Mm.
that had not been taught in high school or college, that wasn't in the novels I was reading or the nonfiction that I was reading. And it started to make me angry because as I, got a daughter-in-law and a granddaughter, I really wanted these stories of women and our resilience and our strength to come to the fore. And so that started with basically, I think Winter Garden was the beginning, but Nightingale was, the big one of that. And I think that this book, The Women, this is the one that in a way is the most personal and most important for me because I lived through, the Vietnam War era. And now, of course, I've made a lot of friends who were nurses and other women that served in Vietnam. And when I see, I guess, the power of their friendship, even all these years later, and when I see the pain and the healing that still needs to be done for, these veterans of Vietnam, it all sort of comes together in a really powerful way for me.
Yeah. I loved how, and by the way, if you're joining us, we're talking about The Women. I've got Kristen Hannah with me, and we're doing spoilers. So if you have not finished The Women, you're going to want to get off and come back and watch this interview after you read it.
Yes, probably. Whoa.
But I also love how, I mean, I have so many things that I want to ask you, but just along those lines, I loved how you took Frankie, because there was a point where I felt like, okay, Frankie isn't really doing anything for anyone else. Like she really was taking from her friendships,
Mm-hmm.
but you finally bring her to this place where she's able to really give back to other women. And again, it's like this whole full cycle thing of seeing the power of women helping each other,
Right.
not competing with each other, but helping each other. And I loved it so much. Okay, so you started you let me jump to one of the things that I like actually was like, I really have to, I told my husband, I was like, this is the one of the things I really wanted to ask you.
Okay.
So around page like 50,
Oh my
51, you have this line in the book where Frankie is sitting on the beach and one of the women comes up to her and they're like, you really shouldn't be out here alone. Soldiers, not all soldiers are good men. And then they give this line and they say, the men out here, they lie and they die. And I was just reading, like I was like, no, they're not all that bad, or whatever. But this is foreshadowing for the men, essentially, and not all of them, but for what's gonna, like, somebody is warning her, giving her a warning.
Right.
Did you go back and put that in? Did that come out like on page 51, or like how does foreshadowing work?
Well, it's hard to, because my process is a very I have a very convoluted and difficult process. So the book that you read is not necessarily even close to the book that I originally started writing.
Okay, tell me about
Um,
what you originally started writing.
so the original story was a love story between Frankie and Rye that lasted the whole of their lives. So
Okay.
that was the beginning. And what happened was, oh, my phone keeps going here. As you point out, you know, you expect the book will be all Vietnam. And as I did my research, I really began to understand that really for a lot of these Vietnam vets, the real issues were upon coming home.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, Frankie was very representative of these nurses. She leaves as a 21-year-old, good girl, virgin, raised in a good family, who feels very strongly moral, and, you know, and believes that the world is a certain kind of place, and then gets over there and is completely taken aback and unprepared, and, you know, and is confronted with the kinds of questions and horrors that she never imagined. And it begins to sort of pull her out of shape. And like you said, it's very clear with Jamie, this is who Frankie wants to be. I love you, I'm attracted to you, but no, that's against, you know, that's against who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But as her world breaks down, you know, she breaks down.
Right.
And I thought that one of the things that was so interesting about the whole Rise situation and the decision she makes when he comes back, the
Right.
terrible decision, I really wanted this book to say that of all the terrible things that Frankie had done, unseen and experienced, all of the things in the war and the PTSD, what destroyed her was the choice to have that affair with
Yeah.
Rye.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm like you, I don't write about extra, you know, marital affairs. It's a very uncomfortable thing for me, but I really wanted to sort of use that to show just how broken
Right.
Frankie had become.
Right. Right. She wasn't even herself anymore.
Right.
So take
Right.
me back though. You start off writing about it's going to be a love story, and then where did it break down?
Well, I wrote it, and let's see. In that version, she and Rai got married in Vietnam. He was always a prisoner of war.
Okay.
He always came back unexpectedly. I can't help myself. I love the drama of that, you know. Um, but then it was them trying to deal with this fact that she had PTSD and he really didn't. And because the prisoner of war experience was very different, you know, than her experience, and her not feeling supported. And the problem was, when all was said and done, it was a letdown, because the first half of the book had been so intense and so visceral. And then, you know, when I met with all of these nurses and talked to them, I realized that their struggle with PTSD and their struggle with coming home was a subject that they needed to have discussed in this book, and that
Uh-huh.
it needed to be part of Frankie's journey. And so that's when this book became, instead of a love story, this became a book about a woman finding her voice and finding her strength and using it to help, you know, other women. And as you point out, at that point, this becomes a book about female friendship as soulmates. You know, they
Yeah.
are really the three. They each go their own way. They're entirely different, but they're there for each other.
Yeah. And I love how you so illustrate that friendships like that, they ebb and flow too, right? They went their own ways, they had their own lives, but they came there when the time came, they were there for each
Right.
other. And I think a lot of times, I think it's good for people to read stuff like that, because I think a lot of times we have this misconception of friendship that if our friends, live in another town, or they end up, chasing another job or a life or a
Right.
family or whatever, that we don't realize that the friendships they're still there though when you put the work in, and you have those moments with those people, they're still there. And I just thought it was really beautifully illustrated. When I read the scene in Hawaii with Rye and Frankie, I had this sinking feeling in my heart, and I wrote down, this book is going to break my heart, because I was, like keeping notes, because at that point I knew I was going to get to talk to you. And I wrote down, I was like, this book is going to break my heart, because it was too good to be true. It felt like, this is too good to be true. It's too early in the story. Something bad is about to happen. So you do this thing in your books where you take your characters like down, down, down
I do.
to the point where I am like, I cannot, if this woman does not catch a break, I think I'm gonna die. I don't know, I'm gonna throw this book
Yes.
across the room or whatever. I remember in the Four Winds, there's this scene where the mom and like her kids, they're hungry and like their money's been stolen, and you're literally like, if she doesn't catch a break, I can't breathe. And then this woman comes along and like gives her a box of used clothes or something like that. And I remember driving down the road, because I'm a big audiobook person, just like bawling. And there were so many moments like that with Frankie, where like she's, she has this wonderful moment with her mom, but her mom recommends pills for her, and you're like, oh no. And so like it just keeps, like she just keeps going down, down, down. What does it feel like when this is happening to your characters? Like, how do you feel, and how do you know when to like bring us up for air?
It's a difficult thing, honestly, because part of the problem is I believe that adversity and challenges um, define us and sort of shape us into who we are. And I believe that when you go through this kind of adversity, you come out different on the other side.
Yeah.
And so Frankie had a long way to go, to she grows up in this sort of idyllic home, which turns out to be in time not as idyllic as she had
Yes.
hoped. That her parents didn't actually believe a lot of the things that they had passed along to her. And so there's this arc with the entire family coming to terms with how broken they were over the loss of Finley, and then Frankie coming home someone else, and all of these difficulties. And I have to say, because I loved Frankie so much, I I really wanted to stop doing this to her. I really wanted to like go, okay,
Ew.
Henry's your guy. Marry Henry, be happy.
Yes, yes.
And yet I felt like if I did that, I would be unfair. I would be telling an inaccurate story about these nurses. And in fact, one of the things that I have two things to say about the nurses who I met. One, they are, like all Vietnam vets, really having trouble with Agent Orange caused
Right.
cancers and miscarriages, and all of the things that are causing that. And they're 70, 80 years old, and so we are losing them. And a lot of these conversations are not being had. And I think that anything that we keep in the shadows, that we don't talk about, that we hide from ourselves and from others, can very easily turn into this kind of shame. And
Mm-hmm.
once the shame starts, I think it's really difficult to be healed. And so anyway, I don't know what else.
Did you did you cry do you like, because I've seen a lot of people write, or when they talk about your books, they talk about how much your books make them cry. Do you
Yes.
ever like, how emotional do you get while you're there with these characters?
You know, I I I don't ever cry when I'm actually writing it.
Mm-hmm.
I and in fact, when I write it the first time, I really pull back. Like I put a barrier between me and what's going on. And because it's too much. It's, it's too difficult. It isn't really until the book is finally done and I read it like in print, that's when it really hits me. And in this particular book, there were a couple of moments. I mean, really, to me, the biggest moment for me personally was when her father finally recognizes
Yeah,
her service. That
huge,
was just like, that was
huge.
big for me.
You did such a great job with the parents because I was so mad at them. And I
Mhm.
was so like, when you find out that they've been lying to their friends
I know.
about what it even is, you're like, what in the world is going on with these people? But there was actually a moment in the story that was very touching to me, where she comes to them and she was like, I need to sell this house and I need to leave. And she's leaving the house and she drives past their house and they're standing there waving. And she says this, there's like a sentence that she's like, I have no idea how long they were standing there. Cause like this is pre Life 360. They didn't know when she was actually gonna, so they had been standing there for a really long time
Yeah.
so that they didn't miss it. And it was a very touching moment because you realize you're like, okay, they're flawed human beings. They're dealing with their own past and their own shame and trauma, the dad and the mom.
Right.
And they really did love her and they really were proud of her, but they didn't know how to say it and how to express it. And when they were like standing there waving, I just had this moment of compassion for them. They weren't like these hateable villains. They were just human beings who were trying to grapple with everything that was going on. And then at the end, when they're there with her at the wall, did Frankie make it on her dad's wall?
Yes, of course.
Or,
In my world, he did.
in
Yeah.
mine,
And
it did too.
that was one of those things where I'm just like, oh, how do I put all of this in there? Um, but, and I didn't know, honestly, I didn't know until I got there that Jamie was going to be there. I was like right on the fence. I was never 100% sort of sure. And by then, I think I got to it and I thought, you know what? She has healed. She has helped people. She's built a life. She is okay with being by herself. She has
Mm-hmm.
these girlfriends. She's close to her parents. And now she's got this life where she's brought Henry and his family in, and like
Yeah,
everybody's this big family. And so I think to myself, you know what? She's ready to be in love.
yeah.
And he was a good guy. I mean, if he hadn't been a good guy, he would have contacted her at some point,
So true.
during all of that. And the fact that he didn't was sort of his way of not pushing her to do what he knew she didn't want to do.
It was a really beautiful wrap up. It was like a it was because we always talk about in our book club, like, do you need a bow at the end of the story? You need everything to come together. And it was like, no, everything didn't come together. There was a lot of like grit and yuck along the
Yeah,
way. So it wasn't that you wanted the whole story to come together. It was just that you wanted one more win for her.
right.
And you were like, oh yeah, that's perfect. And I again, like, in the back of my mind, I was always like, where is he? Because you never heard anything else about him. And so I just thought it was really, really nice, like the perfect touch on how I didn't know that I wanted the story to end. Can you talk about the title? Because your past several books have been, The Nightingale, The Great Alone, The Four Winds. So were you going with like this definite article thing, or how did you like also have the guts to just call it The Women and know
It
that
was
that
hard. It was hard, let me tell you, because I can't remember what I wrote it as now. But I could not title it. I just, nothing felt right. And I think it might have been In Country for a while. I'm not sure. But I kept trying and reaching for something that felt important, because by the time I got to the end of this book and I had met with these nurses and I met them at the wall and at their memorial in DC last Veterans Day, and I was so blown away by seeing, you know, there's probably 100 nurses at the wall at their memorial at night, and seeing them hug each other and cry and introduce their families to these women that they hadn't seen maybe in 40 years. It was so incredibly powerful. And I had started to understand that this book mattered in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kept pitching to my editor the women, let's call it the women. And everybody said the same thing. And I thought the same thing. Well, what women? Like, that doesn't say anything. Why would anybody buy a book that's called just the women? And so we kept, you know, going back and forth. And finally, my editor texted me one day, and she wrote, the missing, the forgotten, the brave, dot, 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 the women. And that was the moment. That was when it all came together, and we did the, you know, the helicopter, and it just, it felt right.
It's it's a great title when you finish it, but at the same time, I find it very, very interesting that you said who would buy a book called The Women, because I'm like,
Clearly.
women, first of all, and second of all, like, you could put out a book that was untitled and I would still buy it, you know?
Well,
And
thank you. I may.
I just thought, when I really processed it, though, yeah, it was not, it was about the women, like her, Frankie, and Barb and Ethel, but it was also about the women who served
Right.
and who were overlooked. And such a great book for also, like, for March, for Women's History Month.
I know.
I just love how that all came together. So, okay, do you have a Barb and Ethel in your life?
I do, actually. And it's funny because you mentioned Firefly Lane earlier. And I moved around a lot as a kid. And so that idea of somebody that had been best friends since seventh or eighth grade, you know, that was something that I dreamed of. I mean, I really wanted this friendship that lasted, you know, the whole of my life. And I never had it. So you know, I created it fictionally. But what I do have are a group of friends. We're mostly mothers, mostly writers, not entirely, that all sort of, you know, came together in the beginning of our writing careers when our kids were little, and who we are all still, you know, best friends, and hang out. In fact, my girlfriend, Megan Chance, and her husband are, you know, coming to spend some days with us this week. And it's really, the older I get, the more important it is. And I think for me, interestingly enough, when friendship really started to matter, and when I really started to prioritize it, because like you were saying earlier, people come and go in our lives, and it takes a real effort to keep up, you know, friendships. And now, of course, we have texting and everything, but like in the women, you know, their phones were expensive, you had to write letters, you know, so it was a difficult thing. And it was really motherhood that really showed me how important friendship was, because there were days, good days and bad, some that I needed to celebrate and some that I wanted to, you know, commiserate.
I just, I think it's obvious that you have women in your life,
Yes.
um, because you wouldn't be able to write so authentically about it if you didn't. And I think it's such a great challenge for so many of us. Okay, a couple quick. I know our time is almost up, but
It's going so
I
fast.
know it. I'm having such a great time talking to you. So you talked about how Firefly Lane was biographical in some ways of your mother. I talked with an author one time who said she always put her grandmother as a character in all of her books.
Oh.
Is there someone that you know that you put in the women, or that you envisioned when you were writing these characters?
No, this is one of those books that really came pretty wholly from the research, from, you know, who these women actually were. And like I said, the more I met them, the more I talked to them and read their stories, the more I guess angry I felt that that they had been so entirely
Hmm.
forgotten. And I'm really, really proud to be able to shine a light on not just women who served in the Vietnam War, but really, frankly, all Vietnam, I mean, all military
Women.
female.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because, you know, our stories are just not told often enough. And I'm really glad to be able to do that.
Um, okay. Did you read any other great, have you read any other great books about women in the military that you would recommend?
Well, I'll tell you, in the back of
Yeah, you list a
the
bunch in the back.
yeah, I would say there's a book called Healing Wounds by Diane Carlson Evans, and a book called Home Before Morning by Linda Van de Venner, who were both nurses in Vietnam. And those are amazing, amazing stories. I'm trying to think what else. You know, it's not something that you read about a
Yeah.
lot.
I went back through my books that I have read over the years and tried to find ones that were about nurses or women in the military and all of that. And I only had two that I could find or recall. And one of them is a book called My Name is Mary Sutter. And
Oh, I haven't
it's
read that.
it's a fiction book about a woman who wanted to be a surgeon in the Civil War.
Oh,
And great story. And the other one that I read was Band of Sisters,
oh,
which was about the women and nurses in World War
yeah,
One.
yeah.
And I love that. Okay, so just like a couple final questions. So I'm just curious. You've written over you. I heard you say like some of your books don't count. Some of them aren't even in publication. You've written around 20-25 books. Which of your books do you feel like is the most underrated? My husband and I like to talk about, my husband writes songs, and we like to talk about the song that we think people just didn't catch
Didn't
on to.
didn't catch the first time. I would say Winter Garden,
Mhm.
which is about World War II Russia,
I read,
and
I loved it.
Magic Hour,
Okay.
which is a strange little book that I still love.
Okay. Um, are you working on anything new?
No,
Or are you just
I'm not,
taking a
Holly.
break?
I need to be working. And in fact, one of the reasons my our girlfriend is coming down this week is we need to like have a spa day and try to come up with something for me to be working on.
So do you have it like, do you just wait until the idea comes? Is there anything you're like, do you ever go to any of these places? Like, did you go to what was the town, Stalingrad, which was when you
Yeah.
wrote about Winter Garden, or did you go to Vietnam, or do you go on site to any of these places and get inspired that way?
I do. I know Alaska very well for the Great Alone. I did Texas and all of Route 66 for the Four Winds. Of course, I went to France for the Nightingale. But I wrote this book during COVID,
Okay.
so I went nowhere. And now I'm, dying to go to Vietnam, but I haven't been able to make it yet.
Maybe that's where you'll get the inspiration. Maybe it's a sequel.
I
I had some people ask to ask you, would you write a sequel about Barbara Ethel and their perspective?
That's an interesting question. I hear that a lot. I hear it actually a sequel question on almost all of my books. This one, there's a lot of story left to
Mm-hmm.
tell. So we'll just see if that comes up. And yes, I love books to grammars. Thanks, guys. Hi.
Um,
I can't read this fast,
there's
but
there, there's so many book lovers that are on tonight. Somebody said they love your book, Homefront, too, of
oh.
your backlist. Um, okay, last question. Who do you read for fun?
Well, it depends on the where I am in the whole book process. I I love thrillers. Like if I am working and writing and like deep into a book, I'm more likely to read someone like Michael Connolly or Chris Whitaker or something Tammy Hogue like that during that period. And then I get all of my books and I save them, my to be read pile. I still love historical fiction. I like epic fiction. I'll still occasionally read fantasy. I love Alice Hoffman. I love Pat Conroy. I mean, anything that is a big emotional
Yeah,
read, I'm pretty much down
yeah,
for.
me too. And I can tell that that's what you love, because that's also in a lot of ways what you write.
Yeah.
I actually usually open up my book club by talking about other books that we've read, and I get people to recommend books. I was so excited to have you on that I forgot. Um, but a book that you might enjoy that I just finished was called Young Bright Women, and
Oh, Jessica
it's
Knoll.
yeah, Jessica Knoll, and it's sort of like a retelling of the Ted Bundy
Mhm.
case. But what's so fascinating about it is that she never names Ted Bundy.
Right,
She calls the defendant the whole
yeah,
time, because her whole thing is like, we're obsessed with serial killers and we know nothing about the
right,
women uh,
right.
that they
Yeah.
murdered. And so I thought that was like a really great read, and it kind of went along with this book as well, and just a great book for March. So
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, that's a great book. I liked her first book too. I can't remember the name of it now, but I think isn't that who I'm thinking of?
yeah, I
I
did.
think so.
That's the first one of hers that I've read, but I know she has some other ones. Okay, and one more thing, but I have to say, for my mom, who my mom was in the seventh grade when during the Vietnam War, and she says she remembers waking up every day and hearing the death count on the radio. And when she read this book twice, she called me. Well, once she called me and just started crying, and she was like, "I don't know why this book is making me feel this way." But she was like, I didn't even realize that the things that I was hearing on the radio wasn't even like accurate. It wasn't even like a true
Mhm.
picture of what I was seeing as a child. And she texted me today and she's like, I can't even talk to you about this book. It just makes me cry. And so just like for all the women who lived through Vietnam and didn't have any words for it, and all the women like me who didn't and didn't know that much about it, thank you. Thank you so much. And just thank you for your stories, because I feel like your stories make me feel like no matter what I go through, no matter how hard it gets, I can make it through. And so thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who showed up, and thank you as an author speaking for all authors. Thanks for this book club. I think it's so important, and it's one of the ways that women really connect. I have met book clubs that have been meeting for 30 years. They, when their kids were born up to their grandkids being born, and that kind of cohesion and camaraderie is so important.
That's awesome. This is our 43rd book with my book club.
Wow.
So
Well,
um,
thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
thank you. Have a great night.
Take care.
Okay, guys, that was amazing. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. A few really quick things to tell you. If you want more about Vietnam, you want to read more about Vietnam, I went back through a couple books that I recommended. One of them is a book called Tap Code. I meant to ask Kristen if she had read this book. It's called Tap Code, and it's like a memoir, or I guess a biography slash memoir about the guy that invented, remember the people who were in prison, the guy that invented the tap code that they talk to each other about. But it's also about his wife. It's like half about his wife, stateside, and he was in prison for like 8 or 9 years, and then his side of the story too. So excellent, 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 highly recommend Tap Code. Also Absolution is sort of like pre-Vietnam War, but women who were living there in the military. Very, very character driven and sort of a heady story if you like very like prose kind of fiction. And then another book that I read years ago was called The Things We Carried. And I'll put it in our email who it's by, because I just wrote down the title. But the audiobook is narrated by Bryan Cranston, and it is excellent. Bryan Cranston, Breaking Bad guy. and his voice is so deep, and he's such a great narrator, and it's truly about the soldiers in Vietnam. And excellent book. So if you want to read more about Vietnam, and then I also mentioned the nurses, Band of Sisters, World War One, and then My Name is Mary Sutter, Civil War. And happy Women's History Month, and thanks for being on for the Holly Furtick Book Club. We will be meeting again. Let me look at my notes. I'm going to be in touch with when we're going to be meeting again, because we're slated to meet again in July. But if we get a great book and we get a great author, you know, I'll always let you know, and we'll hop on here together. I'll make sure I'll give you plenty of time to read the book. I am so happy that you guys read The Women so quickly with me, and that you were on for this discussion tonight. If you aren't a part of our email and you want to get the email, go to hollyfurtick.com, click book club, and then put in your information. I only send out an email like once a month, and I'll give you my books that I'm reading, and when we're going to meet again, and what we're reading, and all of that. And that's it. I hope you guys really enjoyed this conversation. There's no way you enjoyed it as much as I did, because truly I have been waiting to talk to Kristen Hannah for 43 Holly Furtick Book Club books, and tonight was finally the night. And just love being on here with you guys. Thanks for being a part, and we'll see you back here next time.